Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to His Holiness Candramauli Maharaj's daily class. Thank you all for coming. My humble obeisances to you. All glories to Prabhupada. So unless Maharaj decides differently, we are continuing with Canto 1, Chapter 13, verse number 27. Over to you, Maharaj. My humble obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. I need to see the Sanskrit. I can't see it.
Okay, I'll scroll.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada. Guru Maharaj, can you please turn on any light near you? We are seeing you in dark, not much light nowadays.
That's me. I'm coming out of the darkness these days. Well, let's see. Some light.
Yeah.
That does anything?
Yeah, it's better, a little better. Yes, yes, Guru Maharaj. Yes.
I can't see myself, but anyway, you tell me if you need some adjustment. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam. This is Dhritarashtra quits home.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
More light, please, coming from Sukavaha. She can give light simply by her presence. Sukavaha, how's that?
Much better, Guru Maharaj. Thank you. Hare
Yes, Guru
Krishna.
Maharaj.
My obeisances to your and my obeisances to Srila Prabhupada.
Okay, let's see what happens here. Yat sukat parato veha jatani veda atmavam vedikutvam harihat varvajet sanarotamaha. He is certainly the first-class man who awakens and understands, either by himself or from others, the falsity and misery of this material world, and thus leaves home and depends fully on the personality of the Godhead residing within his heart. Purport. There, bring up the purport a little higher. Keep going up, 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 up. Okay, let's stop there and don't bounce it around. Leave it the way it is. Okay. There are three classes of transcendentalists, namely the Dhira, or the one who is not disturbed by being away from family association. 2, one in the renounced order of life, a sannyasi by frustrated sentiment. 3, a sincere devotee of the Lord who awakens God consciousness by hearing and chanting and leaves home depending completely on the personality of Godhead who resides in the heart. The idea is that the renounced order of life, after a frustrated life of sentiment in the material world, may be the stepping stone on the path of self-realization. But real perfection of the path of liberation is attained when one is practiced depend fully on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who lives in everyone's heart as Paramatma. One may live in the darkness jungle alone out of home, but a steadfast devotee knows very well that he is not alone. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is within him, and he can protect his sincere devotee in any awkward circumstance. One should therefore practice devotional service at home, hearing and chanting the holy name, quality, form, pastimes, entourage, etc., in the association of pure devotees. And this practice will help one awaken God consciousness in proportion to one's sincerity of purpose. One who desires material benefit by such devotional activities can never depend on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although he sits in everyone's heart. Nor does the Lord give any direction to persons who worship him for material gain. Such materialistic devotees may be blessed by the Lord with material benefits, but they cannot reach the stage of first-class human beings, as above mentioned. There are many examples of such sincere devotees in the history of the world, especially in India, and they are our guides on the path of self-realization. Mahatma Vidura is one such great devotee of the Lord, And we should all try to follow in his lotus footsteps for self-realization. Is there any more? Can't see. Okay. Om Gyan Timiram Dasya Gina Jana Salakaya. Chaksu Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale. Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve. Gauravani Pacharine Nivase Sasunya Vari Pastyatya De Satarine. Panchakalpa to Dushaki Sindhu Ve Vichapatitana Bhavana Gyo Vaishnava Gyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama. So here in the beginning of the purport, it's mentioned that there's 3 types of people who renounce the world. You can go back to that section. Dira, in other words, one who is not attached to family association, wanting to renounce sort of life, sometimes by frustration due to unsuccessful attempts to enjoy this material world, and a sincere devotee who is absorbed in chanting the holy name and who can easily give up any other material attachment, even family relationships. So ultimately, all of these are authorized. But the idea is, why do we renounce? Because renunciation brings one to the platform of pure devotional service. As long as we are still attached to anything in this material world, we cannot make any progress in devotional service. Attachment in the sense that if we have desires to enjoy something in this material world, then that enjoyment will stifle our progress in devotional service. It says the path of bhakti begins only when one is free from any attempt to become happy by material activities. Then bhakti begins. Before then, one cannot enter onto the path of bhakti. That's why when one takes initiation, they agree to follow those 4 regulative principles, which are the foundation by which all sinful activities occur, and chant the holy names of the Lord of a designated prescribed number of rounds. All of this will bring one's consciousness to the mood of renunciation from material activities. Material activities, or material life as such, is superficial to the living entity's existence. It's ephemeral, it's external, it's almost like a disease. The natural healthy position of the body is when everything is working nicely according to the body's nature. One would get disease, they can't function properly and have to take some medicine to overcome it. So disease is an unnatural condition for the physical body. So in the same way, material life is like a disease for the soul. There is no reason for this material life, but because the conditioned soul wants to enjoy separate from Krishna, and the material world is created in order to facilitate that desire. And therefore, the living entities have to struggle hard when they develop attachments. In that attachment, the first attachment is that one starts to think, I am this body, and things in relationship to the body are either called mine or I. The designations of the body in terms of I am, and then I am of this nation, I am of this gender, I am of this culture. So these and then mine is the possessions we have and the family members we connect with, all are the mine concept. So both of these I and mind concepts are the foundation for the external existence of the material activities and are the foundation of illusion. Therefore, the soul struggles hard in order to find happiness in this I and mind concept, which is not possible because the soul is by nature pure spiritual energy. It can only find satisfaction according to its nature. That means it can only find happiness in the spiritual realm, which is of its nature, not in the material realm. And so renunciation at a certain time in life is required. I was just reading today how King Yudhisthira, it's coming up in a couple of chapters, the 15th chapter of this first canto, when he learned about Kali Yuga coming in. See, when the battle of Kurukshetra was being fought, at that time Kali made his appearance on the scene. But because Krishna was still personally present, he could not do anything as long as the Lord was personally present on earth. But as soon as the battle of Kurukshetra was over, when Krishna completed all his business, and then wound up the Yadu dynasty, bringing them back to their positions either in the heavenly planets or in the spiritual world. And then Krishna realized that his mission had been completed. Now he himself arranged for his departure. And then when he went back to the spiritual world, Arjuna informed Yudhisthira that he is no longer with us. And then Yudhisthira could understand soon that Kali Yuga will now come in full force. And signs were already happening as soon as Krishna left the planet. And greed, violence, falsity, nepotism, all of these things started to manifest within the society, which was not there in full force before when Krishna was personally present. So Kali now, and you'll read in the later chapters of the Srimad Bhagavatam, how after Yudhisthira, he leaves the world. He gives up all family members. He becomes like a mad urchin. He takes his hair down. He gives up all his royal dress. He puts on raggy clothes. He's a king. He's being honored as not only the king, but the king of the world. Such prestige, such popularity, such power. But he saw, why stay? Kali Yuga is coming in. Everything is going to turn upside down. It wasn't why he was fearful of the situation, but he could understand that now it's for time to go back home, back to Godhead. And he never took help from his 4 other brothers, from anyone. He simply dressed himself as an urchin, let his hair down, put on raggy clothes, and with a begging bowl, he started to march towards the Himalayas. And ultimately, he reached his destination. His brothers followed him after, but he was the one that led them. He didn't ask them to come, but they came also. And so it says that, he had so many family members, so many relationships, and they weren't just relationships. They were deep, they were real, they were loving in many ways. But he saw now, what is the use of maintaining and living in this world without the presence of Krishna? And so he wanted to, again, regain Krishna's association, and he prepared himself to go back home, back to Godhead, by entering into a mystic trance where he merged all of his different parts of his existence into the 3 modes of material nature, and ultimately merged all of that into Brahmana effulgence. And in the Brahmana effulgence, he realized himself different from his material body and focused his consciousness completely on the Supreme Personality of Godhead and achieved perfection. It's quite glorious when we hear about these kings and great sages in the past and how they were able to give up everything. In this material world where we live in now, which is the age of Kali, material life doesn't really have anything to offer. years ago, material life was actually much better than it was now. There was quality in relationships. There was quality in material things. Now in Kali Yuga, everything is so destroyed. The water is destroyed, the air is destroyed, the relationships are polluted by lying, enmity, envy, and various types of violence and political maneuvering. This age is started, it's already only 5,000 years into this age. It's so bad already, and it's only destined to get worse as Kali will continue to make his progress by polluting the hearts and minds of the conditioned souls towards sense gratification, not even nice forms of sense, but degraded forms of sense gratification. So the devotee in this age, it's easy to renounce because there's nothing really in this age to keep a devotee here. It's just so bad anyway. It's just, everything is of low quality. Of course, the only thing that we remain attached to is friends and family members. And then those things also, of course, within the devotional society. But taking the example, we'll hear about Dhritarashtra. We'll see how he actually becomes wise after some time. But when Yudhisthira saw what happened to Dhritarashtra, and then later on learned from Narada Muni about from Arjuna himself about the degradation of the age due to the disappearance of Lord Krishna, and then he made his plans to reach self-realization. So it's easy to get attached to things in this world, and it's difficult sometimes to break those attachments. But when we hear from the great sages and read the books and understand what is the actual reality, and we work in such a way as to serve the Lord in devotional service and associate with devotees who are doing the same, we understand that there actually is an environment where all of this is on the perfectional level, and that is the spiritual world. And that's where Krishna personally, and Krishna is always doing various types of programs in order to arrange for the conditioned souls to detach themselves from this material world. He creates difficulties in the lives of some. He attracts others towards him in different ways. But in whatever way he works always to bring the conditioned souls back to him in loving devotion and service. But we can't have Krishna in this material world also. It's not possible. These two things are opposite because the material world is like a jail, and the spiritual world is real life, it's freedom. And so if we want to remain in the jail, there are different cells that are there for the conditioned souls. These cells are categorized as the mode of goodness, the mode of ignorance, and the mode of passion. And each one of these categories of imprisonment, there are different activities and different achievements that are available for the conditioned souls. So we learn from the great souls, and that's why we read Bhagavatam, so we can get an understanding of what is success and how to achieve that success. That is what Bhagavatam teaches us. And of course, when we hear from the spiritual masters who are living in that way, they are walking examples, living examples of Srimad Bhagavatam, then everything becomes clear. And then gradually we have to extricate ourselves from this material entanglement, because otherwise, Maya Ravetse, Kacho Bese, Kacho Habu Budvai, Jeev Krishna Das, A Vishwas, Kolinara Dukanai, life after life, we come back in different situations. But we're Krishna Das, we're not Maya Das. That is our real identity. That's our only identity. And therefore, gradually detaching ourselves from this. And old age is a sign that life is getting very short. But why is old age there? It's a warning that death is coming soon, so prepare yourself for that time. And therefore, we see that according to the Vedic systems, that at a certain age, Prabhupada said, at least 10 to 15 years before you leave the planet. Of course, we can't really determine that, but we can estimate that according to the general principles. That usually after the age of 50, one becomes more and more detached from the material activities and becomes more and more attached to spiritual activities. So at one point, then there is no more material activities left. The women go to holy places and worship the deity to the end of their life, and ultimately go back home, back to Godhead. The men take sannyas, preach Krishna consciousness, or also go to the holy places and worship the Lord, and then leave this material world behind. Because this material world is what it is. It's simply a place of suffering. Krishna makes that point over and over again. Dukkharya Masasritam, Anitya Asubham. He said it's temporary and it's full of misery. It's not eternal. There's no happiness here. So whatever happiness is here is simply a drop of water in the desert compared to the real reservoir of unlimited, fresh, clear, soothing, and thirst-quenching water that is there within the spiritual world, where there's no old age, no disease, no death, and obviously no birth, of course. So this is our goal, and we simply do that by absorbing ourselves in Krishna. Excellent. So we can do that. It's up to us. How much do we really want Krishna, and how much do we really want to get out of this material energy? We see Dhritarashtra. We can see how attachments come in such a way that even though everything is miserable on the material level, still one is still attached to that material situation, and is still making arrangements to improve it. You can't improve the material world because the material world is what it is. It works under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We are not the controllers of material energy. We can try to manipulate the material energy, but we can't control it. It's just like a child. A child can do certain things, and the parents let them do that. But ultimately, the child is controlled by the parent. And when the parent wants to put complete control on the child, he can do that. But we are like children, still trying to manipulate things to make things get better. You can't make this world better. It's not possible. All you can do is gradually understand that that through bhakti, especially the chanting of the holy names of the Lord and serving and associating with the Vaishnavas and hearing the glories of the Lord, his names, his forms, his qualities, his pastimes. These are the activities of those who actually want to get out of this material world. Dhritarashtra doesn't want to get out, but fortunately he has some good fortune, and good fortune is manifesting now. It's like that doctor that is needed when there is a major medical crisis. No other doctor could do it. And that's Vidura, his younger brother, who is actually an incarnation of Yamaraj, who knows how the material world works and whose job is to punish the conditioned souls. So now, coming back in his mood as Vidura, younger brother, well-wisher, and he was listening to Vidura earlier, but when his 100 sons were still alive, when the battle was still going on, he couldn't hear. Vidura was telling him the same thing then, but he couldn't hear. Now, when everything is falling apart, he has nothing left. He's living like a household dog, as it's mentioned in the previous verses. He's more inclined to receive this life-giving message. And that's the way we are too. When everything is going somewhat nicely according to our plans, then we Krishna consciousness is nice, but don't get too serious. Don't become a fanatic, You gotta live in this world and enjoy, and People will tell you that your relatives and friends will also give you these messages, either subliminally or even directly. But then again, after some time, things will change. And then when things fall out, it's just like we had the example of how Indra was in the heavenly planets, and he had committed offense to the one great sage. He had a fall from his position of being Indra, and he had to leave his post, at least temporarily, and come to the material world. And he was forced to take birth as a pig, Indra the pig. And then someone else took over the heavenly throne. I think his name was Nahusha. Nahusha took over. And Indra, now he's a pig. He's surrounded by his nice piglets. He's got his piggy wife and his piggy kids. And he's got some nice mud and there's nice fresh stool all around for enjoyment. And so he's happy. He's enjoying his life in the material world. Of course, no one will think a pig enjoys, but from a pig's perspective, just like Prabhupada was talking, one devotee was saying, I tried to give some halva to my one pig, and he didn't even want it, he spit it out. Prabhupada said, yes, but if you give him stool, he will think, oh, this is like a banquet. One devotee was saying, I had this, there was this pig too. I had this sweetmeat, so I had to roll the sweetmeat in dirt and cover it with dirt, and only then would the pig eat it. So this is Indra. Now he's in that situation. But the man who's been in the heavenly realm wasn't going on so good without his presence. So Brahma came to Indra and said, my dear Indra, you have to go back to the heavenly premise and take over your position. Your role as a pig is over. When Indra said, well, what do you mean? I have my nice wife, I have my children, I have all this nice mud, stool. I'm not going. He was attached. And so Rama thought, what can I do to get him detached? So he arranged for his wife to get killed, and then his sons, his little piggy kids to get killed. And when there was nobody left in the family, then Rama said, come back, Indra. Only then, when he had nothing left, then he made his way back to his position. So we're like that also. When everything is going on nicely and nothing is, it's pretty good. Yeah, we forget about the importance of getting out of this material world. And we still want to somehow enjoy a little enjoyment, spiritual, a little enjoyment, material. Why not? It's enjoyment. Maybe not as good as spiritual enjoyment, but still, I like it. Other people are telling me it's also good. The material world's always coming up with new ways to enjoy. It's the same kind of enjoyment, but they're doing it in different ways. Just like many years ago, I think it was about 40 or 50 years ago, they created this thing called bungee jumping. I don't know if you know what it is. It's they take you on a crane and lift you really high in the sky, and then they tie this huge band around you that is made out of elasticity. And then from a very high place, they push you off this platform and you fall straight down to the ground with this big band wrapped around you. And then before you hit the ground, the thing holds you in such a way that you just bounce in the air. So people were paying money to get pushed off this platform and have this band around them and going up and down and bouncing around. So I was watching one news report that was describing this, and one reporter, if he wanted to give a full report of this program, so he decided to do it himself just so his report would be like, realized. So he did it. And then when he was given his report, the first thing he said in his report, that was the stupidest thing I ever did in my life. And there were people who are paying good money to get pushed off and bounce in the air, and they consider this some kind of enjoyment. You know? Of course, there have been a few incidents where the thing is broke, and then people have died because of it. And then I think that gradually got phased out. But they come up with something new now. We've got these little heliplanes. You can get into this plane and you can fly in the air and go into the area. And you can maneuver this. So you're sitting in a little tiny seat with this propeller over your head, propelled by the machine. You can fly through the air. And even these things, you hit a strong wind, and then you're in trouble. So, you know, people will do anything for sense gratification. It's just the way it is. But devotees will think this is, you know, ludicrous and dangerous. If you really want to be happy, here's the process. Krishna consciousness. Chant, dance, take prasadam, associate with devotees, hear wonderful philosophy, worship the Lord in his different forms, and finds ways by which we can offer our time, energy, intelligence, words in the service of the Lord. And Krishna is there to receive all this. So just by his receptivity to our service, we feel happy. We experience happiness just because we're connecting with Krishna through these activities. That's real life. And that life is beyond this material world. But here we're practicing for it. And while we're practicing, we should not look back toward this material world for some satisfaction, some happiness. Jesus Christ said, put your hand on the plow and look forward and do not look back. In other words, go forward in spiritual life and leave all of this behind. And as you do, you will understand, yes, this is real life. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Dear devotees, all of you have felt enlivened. I see from Rishabh Prabhu's comment. So please, if you can, open up your cameras. I will stop the share and feel free to ask all your questions, or if you'd like to make some comments or even share your realizations, please do so. If you have no ability to speak, you can always write in the chat and I will be happy to read it out to Maharaj. Yes, Ekta, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Hare Krishna to all devotees. I wanted to ask, is there a difference between renunciation and detachment?
Well, detachment is a principle that leads ultimately to renunciation. Renunciation is a more complete form of detachment. We can come to detach from small things in life or little material activities, but renunciation is more like giving up the activities and giving up the desire for enjoyment in this material world. And that is the feature of renunciation. We can detach ourselves from certain things, but that doesn't mean we have reached the stage of renunciation. As it's explained here, there are three categories by which we can explain various ways that renunciation manifests. But detachment is you can become detached from, living in a certain place. You can be detached from relationships with a certain person. But that's not renunciation. Renunciation means a way of life. It's actually a way of life. But Rupa Goswami explains that real renunciation is nirbandha Krishna sambandha, yukta vairagya, which you say by accepting activities in devotional service and as the principle of renunciation. Because devotional service includes renunciation. But anyone can be detached. Even a gross materialist will practice detachment in some form or another. But that doesn't mean he's renounced. There is a false kind of detachment where one detaches oneself because they can see it doesn't give them some pleasure.
Srimati, please go ahead.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Oh, sorry.
But renunciation includes detachment, where detachment doesn't include renunciation. You see the difference, Hector?
Sort of. I guess just to follow on from that, so should we be aiming in terms of to be able to reach that stage of renunciation as a way of living and being? Does that journey include we should aim to detach ourselves kind of slowly to get there, or not really?
Yeah, usually the process is gradual. It's gradual. You try to do it all at once. Prabhupada talks about C.R. Das. He was a very wealthy barrister in London. And at one point, I mean, he was really wealthy. He was making 50,000 rupees a month as a lawyer, working for the British Raj. That in those days, that was back in the 1940s. And so 50,000 rupees a month was it's like millions of dollars, hundreds and thousands of dollars per month. But at one point, he developed this spirit of detachment or renunciation. So he wanted to give it all up and become a sadhu. So he did. He gave up his position, gave up his family, gave up everything. But after 1 year, he died. It was too much. He all of a sudden went from, ground zero to the ultimate principle. So you can do that, but you should do it according to how you can do it naturally. So the process of bhakti helps us to detach ourselves and gradually from various types of material activities and the desire to enjoy material life. So the best form of renunciation is to get absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Then renunciation becomes more or less automatic, along with detachment. And that's Rupa Goswami's formula for renunciation. Because if you detach yourself from something, you have to attach yourself to something else. You can't be just detachment. So we are detaching ourselves from material activities and attaching ourselves to Krishna. And how we attach ourselves to Krishna is the activities of devotional service. When they become fixed, complete in our activities, then we have pretty much renounced material life.
Thank you. It's a beautiful question. All of us have benefited from that. Thank you. Srimati, please go ahead.
Wait a minute. Slow down, Susan. Me and Hector are still discussing this point. Pay attention. So anything you would like to respond to based on what I said?
I think that makes sense, Maharaj. I guess another thought I had was in that journey to renunciation, does Yukta Vairagya help us? So engaging what we do have, even though we may be attached, but engaging that in devotional service.
Undoubtedly, it does help. Yeah, we just say rather than eating food, we eat prasad. Rather than listening to cinema songs, we do kirtan, or we hear And then we hear the bhajans of the great souls. So we transfer our attention from the material to the spiritual, although in many cases, not all, the activities were similar. We talk, instead of talking about worldly things, we talk about devotional activities of Krishna. All of these brings about gradual awareness of our relationship with Krishna. When it becomes complete, then we are renounced of all material activity. Yeah, so these little things, they apparently are not little, but these smaller things are stages or steps towards that. Just like we make vows sometimes that I'm going to fast from a certain food. Just like we're in the middle of Chaturmasya now. So for the first month, we fast from spinach. From the second month, we fast from yogurt. Third month, we fast from milk. And the fourth month, we fast from urdol. So these are recommended for the Chaturmasya. And Prabhupada said we should follow this simple principle. And he writes one purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, explaining that the devotee should follow this. And so we're detaching ourselves from these types of foodstuffs for 1 month. It's helping us to practice the mood of detachment. So we do that. We make a little vows to give up a certain type of food or going a certain place or something, some little vow, which helps to bring about the mood of detachment. These things are useful, good.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Thank you, Hector. Next question.
Srimati, go ahead, please.
Yes, Mataji, thank you. Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Here in the purport, it's written like there are 3 classes of transcendentalists. So in that, the second one is one in the renounced order of life, a sannyasi by frustrated sentiment. So why Prabhupada is giving this particular type of sannyasi like a good position here? I didn't understand, Guru Maharaj.
Well, there's karma sannyas and then there's bhakti sannyas.
Okay.
Karma sannyas means frustrated sentiment. People take to the renounced order because they can enjoy the material world. They've tried to enjoy, and therefore better to renounce it. But karma sannyas is not complete. Frustrated sentiment has to manifest itself into positive activity. If positive activity doesn't manifest, then one may also go back to material activities again. So therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Visayam vinivartante viharasya dehinam aso varjam aso pyasya param drisvam nivartante. When you get a higher taste, then you can give up the lower taste. The bhakti is meant to give you the higher taste. In this case of that, this example it's given in this purport is that there's no higher taste. It's just not just a situation where one is frustrated in the attempt to enjoy. Frustrated sentiment. But they're in a good position to take up, spiritual activities. But if they don't, then they will gradually fall down. That's the same with the impersonalists. The impersonalists, they also give up material activities for the same reason. And sometimes they reach a stage of liberation into the supreme. But because they don't take up bhakti, Lord Brahma explains what happens to them. He says, again, they fall down into the material world to take up material activities, mostly in the mode of goodness to start off with. And then some of them also fall down into. That's why you see a lot of these so-called swamis that go on today as, spiritual leaders. Most of them have practiced some kind of spirituality in the previous life, and they've fallen from that position. Now they're back in the material world again. So they take up in some position again. Sometimes they open up, food co-ops, or, they got the yogi tea program, take your yogi tea. Or, different kinds of, mode of good programs to help people, have a healthier life. And you see, many of these are started by these yogis who actually are fallen from their position in the Brahma Jyoti. They come back to the material world.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much. And I just want to know about another term, Parivrajaka. So can you please explain to me about this term, Guru Maharaj, like who is actually a Parivrajaka?
Well, Bhaktisiddhanta took the principle of sannyas and divided into 4 categories: Bahudak, Kutichak, Bahudak, Parivrajacharya, Paramahansa. And so Kutichak means one is still living in the village and still in association with family members, but doesn't perform family activities. They simply live in the village, detaching themselves from family activities. Kutichak Bahudak means they go around and now they're completely distinct from the family, and they live by begging. They go from place to place, simply begging and collecting alms, and also giving spiritual advice. Parivrajacharya means then now, the next stage is they go out and they travel and preach. So Parivrajacharya is traveling preacher. So Prabhupada started us off on that stage of sannyas. And he says, actually, when you reach the stage of maturity in Parivrajacharya, then you can sit down in one place and do your individual bhajan. That is your worship of the Lord. And then that's the Paramahansa stage, which is the perfectional stage of sannyas. So our movement is mostly centered around Parivrajacharya, traveling and preaching. But there are devotees who in our society who don't travel as widely as they used to. Now they sit down, they write books, or they take one area of the world and stay there and preach in that area without traveling. And that's an advanced stage of Krishna consciousness.
Yes, Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Srimati. Go ahead, Shilpesh Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I wanted to follow up on that question about the yogis who fall down from the Brahman Jyoti and start these programs. If they had reached such a high position before in a previous life, why do they not then turn to bhakti in that life rather than start these programs?
Yeah, that's the same thing we ask. Why don't they do it either? Because they're envious of the Lord. Envy is what causes this conditioned soul to fall from the spiritual world, and they maintain that envy. They want to be the enjoyer, even in the spiritual activities. Vaishnava is not trying to be the enjoyer, he's trying to be the servant. That's the difference. Yeah, some of them do, just like you had the example of the 4 Kumaras. They were Brahmavadis, they were impersonalists. They had realized the Supreme Lord as Brahman. This is the first stage of spiritual realization, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. So they had reached that stage, but they were non-envious. So when they came in contact with the lotus feet of the Lord, by smelling the tulsi leaves and sandalwood paste offered to the Lord's lotus feet, their consciousness changed and became attracted to devotion to the Lord, and ultimately they became, full-fledged devotees, Vaishnavas. And then, of course, they started their own sampradaya, which was the Chatushushana sampradaya, the four Kumaras. So, yeah, we have an example of those who are not envious of the Lord, although they are realized in the Brahman. Still, when they understand or come in contact with bhakti, they immediately adapt that process. But the Mayavadis, they think everything is Maya. They think even when God comes to this material world, he takes on a material form also, which is made out of material energy. So that's Maya. They have their twisted understanding of Shastra. And that's a whole thing, Sankaracharya taught that in order to get people away from Buddhism. Buddha came to get people from stop killing animals in the name of Vedic sacrifices. And he was successful, but he taught Gnostic. Gnostic means atheism. Although Buddha was an incarnation of the Lord, he was teaching the process of atheism to get people to stop killing animals. You see how much God loves animals, that he actually incarnates to save the animals. And then Sankaracharya, in order to get people back onto the Vedas, came with this monistic principle that God actually is one, that there is one absolute eternal spirit, and we are also part of that oneness. Therefore, we are also of that same nature. There's no division. And they would say, what is that? What is that statement? Eko Brahmana Dviti Nasti. Eko Brahmana Dviti Nasti. Brahmana is one, not two. But Sankaracharya, Lord Shiva, he had to do that same dirty service in order to bring people back onto the Vedas, which was people were taken off the Vedas because they were using the Vedas to kill animals. And then we have the progress of the next was Ramanujacharya, who started talking about Vishishta Dvaita, and that there is two, not just one, and then qualified, that's qualified oneness. And then you had, after him was Madhavacharya, and then ultimately Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give the complete and correct understanding of Chintya Veda Veda Tattva. That the living entity is one with, different than the Supreme Lord simultaneously. Everyone is spirit, but there is a supreme spirit. Eko Bahunam Didadati Kamam Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. Eko Bahunam Didadati Kamam, that there is Nityo, there is one who is maintaining all of the other Nityas, that is us. It's not that we are the same as that one Nitya. We are different than him, but at the same time, we are of the same quality. And that's the basis of bhakti, that we have an eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord in devotion. That he is the supreme and we are the subordinate, but we are made of the same quality as the Lord. For the Mayavadis, they said everyone is spirit, therefore everyone is God. But that's illusion. If you're God, why do you go to the dentist when you have a toothache? And God dentist helps God who got the truth out, You can poke holes in their philosophy. It's quite easy because it's ridiculous. But if you meet them directly, they are very expert at speaking, and they can entrance your mind with philosophical statements that sound very reasonable and logical. If you listen to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, some of his devotees would take the position of Mayavadis and discuss it with him. Like that verse from the Bhagavad Gita, what is it? From the 15th chapter, verse 7. What is that verse? 15:7. Oh, I got it right here. Let me just find it. You don't have to bring it up. In 7. Manai vamso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanati masastani dhyani prakriti. Now Krishna says, the living entities in the conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. So Krishna says, the living entities are my eternal fragmental parts. They're conditioned and they're struggling. Now the Mayavadis will say that's only during the manifestation of the material world. But when the material world is not manifested, then the living entities are actually God. That's their interpretation of this verse. But the verse says Sanatana. The Prabhupada makes that point. Sanatana means eternal. Eternally conditioned for the entity. So if you hear from Prabhupada and you read the books, you'll see, you can understand how these different spiritual masters, spiritual people are actually twisting things in order to fulfill a certain material desire, in order to gain power, prestige, followers, or to make some economic gain. And they do that also. So if you listen to Prabhupada, you're on the right track. You get everything clear. And Prabhupada's been proven to be, by great souls, that he is speaking what Krishna spoke, not what anybody's thought that he created. He probably didn't create anything. He simply was the representative of speaking what Krishna spoke, but in a way that we can understand it. We were talking about that yesterday. When you give a class, you read and understand the philosophy, and then you explain it in your own words. That's the Acharya. They know the philosophy, and then they explain it according to their own realization, without changing the actual meaning, highlighting the meaning through their own practice of devotional service. Because they're practicing it, they can also understand it, and because they can understand it, they can speak it from different angles of vision. Prabhupada was like that. So hear from Prabhupada, and you'll find everything you need to know and more is there in Prabhupada's books and in his lectures, everything.
Thank you, Shilpesh Prabhu.
If you don't believe me, then try it and see what happens. I don't say you have to believe what I say. I'm not here to, force you to accept what I say, but this is my understanding. And it's the understanding of many. So if you want to get into that understanding too, then make your experiment. If you come to a different understanding, then let's hear about it.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Shilpesh Prabhu. Namrata, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, to glories to Srila Prabhupada. So my question is about Hare Krishna. Are you able to hear? Am I audible?
Yeah, very good.
Okay. So 5,000 years ago, there was one Dhritarashtra, but when we see in today's time, we will see, I think, Dhritarashtra in every house, almost every house. So should we understand that this kind of mentality cannot be uprooted unless they meet the sannyasi sort of person, or pure devotee cannot be uprooted without them?
Right. Yeah, because the attachment is they're very strong. Or sometimes by circumstance, they somewhat become a little detached. Even you'll see Dhritarashtra couldn't hear, but when the circumstances changed, then he was more able to hear. He was hearing from the same person both times, but when his material situation wasn't threatened so much, he couldn't hear. So generally, that's what it takes. But therefore, we speak and we try to enlighten people through knowledge. But we plant the seed, and hopefully they'll accept. And if they don't accept, usually time will bring them to that understanding.
Thank you, Maharaj. Because I've seen such a person practically, and I really feel it is so hard to cut through the mentality of this kind of people unless there's a pure soul himself.
Yeah, keep talking. I'm with you. Yeah, it's attachment goes deep. Yeah, well, unless you get the higher taste, there's no chance for detachment. Or unless your lower taste becomes so bad that you realize you can't be happy in the way I'm going anymore. That's why it says that at a certain age, one should remove himself from family association. And then way that detachment will become more likely. The Vedic scheme is life in certain situations. And so towards the end of life, one should not remain in the family to the very end of life. One should remove themselves from the. But you'll see in today's world, and the Bhagavatam explains how even people who have positions in the material world, unless they're dragged by death themselves, they stay in their positions. You get these politicians who stay in office and they can't even see anymore what to speak about thinking properly. They're still in their political positions, and then death drags them out. That's the only thing. It's just what Kali Yuga is like. Material attachment is like that. So, in order to prevent that, the Vedic scheme is at a certain time. Yudhisthira was the example. When he saw that there was no reason for him to continue in his position as king, Kali Yuga would be coming in full force. So he decided to detach himself from everything and place Parikshit Maharaj on the throne, his grandson, and then go back to the spiritual world. if you follow these chapters, this is these from 13 onward, we get a very historical progression of what's happening as Dwapara Yuga ends and Kali Yuga begins. This first canto is just very historical in a very chronological way. Very nice. And then Parikshit Maharaj has to deal with all the problems of Kali Yuga. As Kali Yuga takes its full force. And you'll see that in the 16th chapter. And that one starts to begin there. Right now we're in the 13th chapter.
Thank you, Maharaj. So far, what I'm understanding is we should try to just if we ever come across such Dhritarashtra, we should try to just feed them prasadam, and else we should stay away from them.
If you can help them, that's fine, but don't waste time.
Okay.
In other words,
Thank
if they're not receptive to what you offer them, better to put your time and energy where there is more receptivity.
Yes, Guru Maharaj, I hear that. Thank you. One follow-up question I have from another person another devotee who was talking. So can I ask that, or should I wait for Scarlet Mataji?
Go ahead.
Okay. So when we're talking about impersonalist, I was just thinking that we also talk about developing farm communities. So farm communities, there are a lot of people apart from devotees who are trying to develop this kind of farm communities, but their mindset is more of Mayavadi or on impersonal basis. So does this farm communities, if they are developing, are they sustainable on that grounds also?
When you talk about community, you have to have a central goal, or a goal that the community can organize around. If the goal is simply my interests, then after some time the community will break down because everyone will have their own interests. Krishna conscious communities are centered around Krishna's interests. Therefore, we have a center. We can sustain that. It's all around Krishna, not around each individual devotee. But each individual devotee participates and also benefits from it because Krishna is the center. So these material communities and even quasi-spiritual communities, as soon as certain things change, then they have to look for a new center or a new reason to continue. But we don't have to change our reason. Our reason is for Krishna, and our reason stays in that same way. It's all about serving Krishna in that environment.
Thank you. So it's very nice. Yes, Guru Maharaj, please continue.
That's all. You can just take this water and throw it. Just dump it in the shower. That's it. Just water. Okay, Scarlett.
Hare Krishna, thank you for today. I would give you an example about something, and I need help to understand if it's okay that way. For instance, there is a person, he likes to, he is very spiritual, but very fanatic way, and he just doesn't want to have contact with the family, and just try to hide himself in the room and read. Now it's the family, they are very sad and they resent his spirituality. So doesn't this create a bad karma for family because he do it in this way instead of doing it easier, talk to them and try to make them to understand and just not to go away?
There is three kinds of devotee: Kanista Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, Uttama Adhikari. So he's Kanista. Kanista means materialistic devotee. That he's only interested in his own spiritual life and nobody else. And he doesn't want to be bothered by anyone else. That's called Kanista. Kanista means neophyte. Called Prakrita Bhakta. That's called materialistic devotee. That's mentioned in this Nectar of the Destruction. So, if he continues, then he'll probably go away after some time. Unless he gets good association, he won't come to the next stage, which is Madhyama. Madhyama Adhikari means 4 qualities: worship the Lord, make friends with the devotees, preach to the innocent, and avoid the atheist non-devotees. So that's where our movement functions. We are meant to come to the Madhyama platform. There are devotees in our movement who are Kanista, who, my guru, I love God and I love guru, and that's about it. Everybody else is about adoration. So it's a certain level of practice which is acceptable, but it is not. It's just like if you go to school and you stay in the first grade forever, then what's the use of you going to school? And you have to graduate and go on to the higher grades. So sometimes people start off like that. Kanista Adhikari. So unless he gets association with more advanced devotees, he won't grow. At least he should accept association from more advanced devotees.
May I ask a follow-up question to that?
Did you get that point?
Yes, association in the spiritual activity, it's very important to practice all aspect of it, not only to hide and to just be for yourself and just.
You should know the category. It's a certain. Have you read Nectar of Devotion? Have you read Nectar?
I have read some of it, not all of it, but some of it I have read. Yes.
Have you read Nectar of Instruction?
Some of it, not all. Yes, I read. I just read everything and little by little of everything.
Well, if you read Nectar of Instruction, describes these 3 levels and the symptoms. Also in the 3rd canto of Bhagavatam, and the teachings of Kapila Dev, he talks about Kanista Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, Uttama Adhikari.
Yes, but what I mean is because of this practice, there are so many are going to a family member. They get maybe bad karma because they resent his practice. Isn't it you do not there directly, but still you create bad karma for others because of the way you do it, right?
Well, obviously, yeah, he's not helping others for sure. He doesn't have any regard for other people.
So it's important to do it gradually and nicely, not to be very harsh.
So you have to understand it's a certain stage of practice. There's people like that in our temples. There are people like that everywhere in our society. They're called kanista, neophyte. They don't preach, and they don't really regard other devotees as important. But we let them go on, and hopefully they'll come to a higher stage if they get the association.
Okay, thank you.
Dheera Prashanta Prabhu, is that Ash Prabhu? Would you like to ask your question, or should I read out your question from the chat?
Hare Krishna Mataji, I'll ask my question now. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for your class. Maharaj, the purpose for today's class talks about the 3 types of transcendentalists. And a common factor in all these 3 is being away from family life. So my question was, is it necessary for us to stay away from home to be a transcendentalist? Or is there any way we can still be transcendentalist while being at home or around family?
It's tough. But Prabhupada, when we joined the Hare Krishna movement, Prabhupada said we should regularly keep contact with our parents and try to make them favorable. But not that we stay and live with them. And so if you stay and live with them, you won't really grow much because you'll still be doing the same activities that you did as a materialist. Although you may be able to do something. So Prabhupada didn't want us to live with our families. He wanted us to, for brahmacharis, move into the ashram. If we're moving towards the grihastha life, then prepare for that section. Now we have what is called these different ashrams where you can, you're not married, you go and you live within other devotees together and you practice Krishna consciousness. And you're deciding whether you want to move on to married life or you want to enter into the ashram as a full-fledged brahmachari. So, living at home is really quite contrary to spiritual development. Visiting, keeping contact with parents, encouraging them, and just acknowledging that you still care about them. In other words, Prabhupada didn't want us to ignore our parents, but somehow or other bring our parents in slowly, carefully by being ideal in our own Krishna consciousness. So if you're married, it's a little easier. If you're not, then it's difficult because you're forced to live in that environment. So living at home is not really recommended at all for those who are seriously practicing Krishna consciousness. It's a little different with women, but men for sure, they should not live with them.
Is that all right, Ash Prabhu?
His name is Ashish.
Oh, Ashish Prabhu?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
He's trying to hide. Are you trying to hide behind Ash?
No, Maharaj. I didn't realize my name on Zoom was saved as Ash.
As soon as you speak, I recognize who you are.
I thought that was Dheera Prashanta, my god brother, because he also calls himself Ash sometimes. So I really thought it was Dheera Prashanta Prabhu. Sorry about that.
Right.
I don't,
This is Ashish.
sorry, I went on mute. There are no more questions, it seems, from our audience. Would anybody like to make some comments or share realizations? Okay, Scarlett Mataji has raised her.
I think we're running out of time. It's already an hour and a half into the program. So let's hold it from there, and then tomorrow we'll, if you have any questions, just hold it and we'll go on from there.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much for today's class. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hello.
Gurudeva. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Tomorrow is with the group from Harrisburg.
Yes, Guru Maharaj. Yeah.
What's the verse? Do you have it offhand?
Sorry, Guru Maharaj, I have to look it up. I think it's first chapter, 16th chapter, I think.
Yeah, I also have it. I just have to find it somewhere. Okay, thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
very much. I'll post in the group for the devotees. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Maharaj. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you all, dear devotees, for
Hare
coming on
Krishna.
the call and asking so many nice questions and stimulating a good discussion. Thank you so very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.